Hi, I'm Miss Rita, and on the day that was supposed to be my new beginning, my husband handed my wedding gift to his sister while I was still standing in the dress I paid for. Folks clapped, he laughed, and I smiled quietly. 'Cause what they didn't know was that the next morning his entire world would freeze. How did I get here? And what did I do next? I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing the lace on my gown one last time. 64 years old, and here I was dressed in white again. Not for some fantasy, not for some fairy tale, just for the hope that maybe, just maybe, love could knock twice. The choir outside hummed, "His eye is on the sparrow," soft and sacred. And for a moment, I let myself believe in miracles. I'd been a nurse for 38 years, buried one husband, raised 3 kids, and carried a family that rarely remembered to say thank you. And now, Howard, sharp suit, sharp tongue, sharp mind, businessman, widower, said all the right things in the beginning. But lately, he'd been more elsewhere. Distant in the way a man is when he already made up his mind, still I kept walking forward. Sometimes the devil don't come with horns. Sometimes he comes with a smile and a tailored suit. The church was packed, his side outnumbered mine. Folks in white hats and tighter smiles. His daughters sitting up front, arms crossed like the pews offended them. I walked slow, careful, like maybe grace might meet me halfway down the aisle. Howard didn't look up when I reached him, didn't offer his hand, said his vows like he was reading a grocery list. Then I heard it. "She just want his money," whispered one of his daughters, not low enough. I turned my face forward, didn't flinch, didn't blink, but inside I folded in half. I tried to remember why I said yes. Try to hold on to the version of Howard that brought me flowers after church and called me queen when no one else was listening. But that man hadn't shown up today. This man next to me, he was cold marble. They clapped when we kissed, some louder than others, most not at all. The choir stopped. We walked out into sun that felt too bright, and I knew right then I wasn't walking into a new life. I was walking into something I already knew too well, loneliness wrapped in ceremony. At the reception, he took the mic. I waited half hoping for something sweet, even halfway kind. Instead, he said, "I must have done something right to land a pretty young bride at my age. Lord knows she was lucky to find a man like me." Laughter, not the good kind, the kind that stings on the way down. I smiled. For the cameras, for the family, for the lie. But something inside me cracked. A cousin leaned over and whispered, "He ain't right for that." I nodded like I agreed, but my throat burned too hot to speak. In that moment, I didn't feel like a bride. I felt like a decoration someone forgot to take down. Should I leave right now? No, not like this. That's what they wanted to see me crack. I held my fork like it was armor and nodded through the rest of the night. No honeymoon, no dancing, just a car ride to nowhere. He didn't ride with me. Said he needed space tonight. Gave me a handshake like I was a business partner and closed the car door. I sat in the back seat of the lift, still in my dress. The sequins scratched at my skin. The driver didn't speak. Thank God for that. Home was too quiet. I dropped my purse on the counter, sat at the edge of the couch, and pulled off my shoes. My knees ached, my heart too. I found the note when I reached for a tissue, folded in my purse, written in pink gel pen. Grandma, don't ever forget your worth. Layla. 12 years old and already wiser than half the grown folks at that reception, I didn't cry. I leaned back, stared at the ceiling, and replayed every moment in slow motion. Every look, every word, every silence. And then something in me whispered, soft but sharp, check his phone records. So I did, and that's when I saw the first crack in the mask. I woke up to silence, the kind that hums in the walls when something ain't right. His side of the bed hadn't been touched, pillows still fluffed, sheets smooth. My wedding dress hung over the chair like a reminder that joy was borrowed last night and returned broken this morning. Outside my window, Miss Bernice's old radio played faintly, gospel like always. Trouble don't last always, the singer moaned. But Lord, it sure overstayed its welcome. I walked to the mirror. Yesterday's makeup clung to my face like lies I hadn't washed off yet. My eyes told on me. I stared at myself for a long time before whispering, I should have known peace don't start with pain. My phone buzzed, missed calls, mostly from Vanessa. One text, Mama, you okay? That video's going around. What video? I tapped the screen and the screen tapped back with shame. There we were, frozen in motion. Howard standing tall in his suit, toasting his luck, while I sat there smiling through grit teeth. The comments underneath said, enough. Poor lady. Desperate bride. She didn't deserve that. I let out a breath so slow it sounded like a prayer. My fingers trembled, but I didn't cry. I knew how the world worked, but it still hurt when it laughed in your face. Vanessa's call came next. She was already crying when I picked up. Mama, I'm so sorry. They got it all over Facebook, TikTok too. You're trending. They're calling you, she choked, the desperate bride. I held the phone close, steady. Don't you cry for me, baby? Crying never changed a coward. But Mama, You save your tears for somebody who deserves them, I said. I don't. Still, there was something else in her voice. Something she wasn't saying. I could feel her holding something back. Mothers know. After she hung up, I sat still, trying to breathe through the ache. Then buzz. A new alert. My bank app, joint account activity, withdrawal. Several $1,000s. Not by me. I tapped in. Nurse instincts kicking in like when you catch a chart that don't add up and you know someone's lying before they say a word. There it was. The name, Camellia Whitford. Now I ain't one to forget a name, especially one that used to flash across Howard's screen with too many emojis and not enough explanation. I remembered asking him once. He laughed it off. That's just my business partner. Business partner. Funny, I said out loud, how every man's business partner always smells like cologne and guilt. By late afternoon, I'd made up my mind. I put on my old nurse scrubs, not to work, but because they made me feel like myself again, capable, clear-headed. I drove down to the restaurant Howard co-owned. The place looked sleepy. Blues music floating from the speakers. A young waiter looked up when I walked in. You just missed Mr. Howard, he said. He left with Miss Camellia about 20 minutes ago. I nodded. Like that didn't mean anything. Then I saw the wall. Big photo Howard and Camellia, standing proud, labeled in gold. Owners and founders. No mention of me. I stared at that photo so long, it blurred. You build a man's table, and somehow your name still don't make it to the plaque. I didn't make a scene. I didn't throw a fit. I thanked the waiter, smiled tight, and walked out slow. Back home, I printed every bank transaction, every email confirmation. I dug into our shared files like a woman scouring x-rays for fractures. And baby, I found plenty. Let them think I'm quiet. Quiet don't mean blind. I sent Vanessa a message. Mama's handling it. And I meant every word. That night, I was getting ready to turn in when I heard laughter coming from Howard's side of the house. Muffled, but clear. A woman's voice, then his. And one name, like a slap in the dark. Camellia. The house was haunted by absence. I walked through quiet rooms where his laughter once lived. The air felt too empty, something missing. I touched his cufflinks on the dresser. Gone. His favorite whiskey on the shelf? Also gone. Only a half-burned candle from the wedding remained on the dining table, its wax pooling down like regret. Love shouldn't leave you in the dark. I didn't rush through the rooms. I catalogued everything. A receipt slipped under a rug. A file folder slightly askew. Emails open on my laptop. The absence of his things felt louder than their presence. Vanessa dropped by in mid-afternoon, eyes red. She hugged me, whispered warnings. But I held steady. Baby, calm women build storms that don't announce themselves. I told her. She nodded. Night came. I waited until the house slept before I moved. I'd always respected locked drawers. He enforced them with tone, not force. But tonight, I slipped in. Folders of deeds, mortgages, contracts. Each one had my name erased, crossed out, or never there. One notarized document showed he'd transferred our shared property into a shell LLC just 2 days before the wedding. He cut me out quietly, cleanly. He married me to make it look legal. I grabbed my phone and snapped photos. I scanned documents into my old nursing binder, hiding copies. The binder once carried patient charts. Now it would carry proof. Doubt tried to claw me, but I stood firm. I whispered in my mind. They used my trust against me, but they underestimated that a quiet woman remembers everything. Later, the phone rang. Camellia. Her tone was smooth. Miss Rita, maybe you should stop contacting Howard. He's under a lot of stress. I kept the calm. Honey, I stopped chasing men before you were born. She laughed soft, a sound meant to disarm. Then she mentioned an account number, the same one I saw drained this morning. That's when I knew. She wasn't just running interference, she was in the scheme. I turned on the recorder I'd hidden years ago. I let her talk. She tried deflection. I let silence force the truth. At the end, I said softly, people forget the quiet ones take notes. Her breath caught. The line went dead. I sat in darkness, heart thumping. That voice memo would be called insurance tomorrow. But tonight, it was justice gathering strength. A faint sound from the vent, Howard's voice downstairs, a woman's voice laughter. Camellia's? Engaged in planning. I held my breath, then flicked off the light. I sat, listening. Predator calm. You brought the storm home, Howard. I'm just learning to dance in it. Morning came ragged and restless. I woke before dawn, heart drumming like a hostile guest. The recording of Camellia's call lay open on my phone screen. I listened to it again, her voice smooth, her tone tight. Everything she said, every pause, every clipped word, they made sense now. I counted what I knew. Money moved, my name erased, her presence in his finances. The silence I'd been asked to believe. I dressed slower than usual, picking my clothes like I was armor. Not victim, but strategist. Silence is the luxury of liars. I reminded myself as I buttoned my blouse and stared at my reflection, steadying my face for the fight I intended to start. I drove to his restaurant with the calm of someone who knows too much. The front door gave way to silence. The manager's eyes widened when I asked for ledger access. I'm a partner, I said quietly. I need the books. He faltered. We walked to the back office, empty hallways, the hum of refrigeration, the faint smell of last night's grease. I half expected Howard to burst in and shout. Instead, we walked deeper. In drawers, I found line items I knew too well. Camellia Whitford consulting fee, rent shared, office. Shock didn't crack me. I snapped photo after photo with a steady hand. Suddenly, behind me, a voice. You shouldn't be here. Camellia, stepping out of the shadows, face composed. She claimed to be an investor. I didn't wait. I played the voice memo. She stuttered, denied. I stared her down. You told me to stop contacting Howard. Why? Because you were already inside. Her mask slipped. She stormed out, door slamming behind. I stood in her wake, no apology, no explanation, just the leftover air of confrontation. Anger flickered inside me, but I grounded it. I texted Vanessa, "Don't take his calls." Then I sat with my hands folded and remembered my mother's words. You don't win fights by screaming, you win by being still at the right moment. I called Sterling, my old paralegal friend, asked him to draw a notice, freeze business activities. I let certainty replace doubt. I didn't need screams, I needed proof. I whispered under my breath, I don't need to be loud, I only need to be certain. That evening, the porch felt colder. I found a manila envelope waiting for me, addressed in his handwriting. Inside, a copy of the LLC documents and a note. You're playing with fire, Rita. Don't get burned. I stood in the dark, gripping it tight. The mask is off. Now we see who's real. I sat at my kitchen table, hardly daring to open the envelope earlier. The handwriting was deliberate, confident. That's Howard's slant, but not his pressure. It struck me how calm the threat was. He didn't scribble it in fury. He penned it in assumption. He meant for me to flinch. He meant for me to back off. I unfolded it, smoothing the crease. It carried copies of LLC papers, the same ones I'd glimpsed before. He left a note. You are playing with fire, Rita. Don't get burned. Most would freeze in fear. Not me. I already had the evidence, bank statements, emails, recordings. This envelope was a test. A warning dressed up as intimidation. I tucked it in my purse. I turned off the kitchen light and inhaled, bracing myself. This time, I would go to him with truth on my side. I drove to his private office, the one behind the restaurant where he claimed business matters. I knocked lightly, he answered, startled in a crisp shirt. I walked in. The air stuck thick. I came for closure, I said. I didn't say please. But you owe me more than silence. Howard's lips curved into a practiced smile. Rita, you know how sensitive some of this is. I don't want trouble. I took a deep breath. I know more than you think. I laid the LLC papers and banking details on his mahogany desk. So tell me, how'd you erase me? How'd you cut me out before the vows were done? His voice tightened. This is business. You always took things too personally. I leveled my eyes. And you always mistook my silence for stupidity. He leaned forward. You signed the prenup. Remember that? I slid forward several emails, the ones where he'd manipulated terms in secret. Funny how those negotiation drafts never told me about your transfer scheme. His face paled. He looked at me like a man caught naked in daylight. I pulled a card from my purse. Sterling's number is on here. You got two choices. Let this end quietly or hear it in court. I turned, walking out with dignified steps. He stayed behind, mouth open, no words. Back home, relief and exhaustion mingled. I sat in my living room, the envelope now tucked in a safe spot, evidence stacked in folders. Vanessa stopped by, eyes wide. She looked at me different strong now. There's power in knowing when to speak and when to prepare, I told her. She nodded. She saw me, not the broken woman they tried to make me. I paused, thinking of the storm still ahead. Rain doesn't warn before it hits. That night, a ping from my laptop, a bank notification. The account, Howard, used frozen. I didn't fist pump. I didn't celebrate. I closed the laptop slow. Fair's fair. I woke up before the alarm could scold me. The room was still, too still. I turned my head and saw it Howard's envelope, right where I left it. But this time, it wasn't just a pile of papers. It was proof. The phone beside it blinked again. Bank alerts. Another withdrawal. Not a big one, but the kind that adds up when you're not looking. I unlocked it, went through the app, and followed the trail. Not one or two, but 10, maybe more transactions. Quiet, hidden, spaced out just enough to feel like oversight, not theft. That's when I heard it in my head again. That night, long ago, over some wine. You never ask enough questions, Rita. He laughed when he said it. I didn't. I never forgot. I grabbed a notebook, wrote down the dates, the amounts, the times he was working late or traveling. It all lined up too neat. I looked at the page, then out the window. I counted the days. I whispered. Now I'll count the lies. The drive to his townhouse wasn't long, but it felt like I'd traveled through years. The street was quiet. His lawn still perfect. That man always kept up appearances, even when everything behind the door was rotting. I rang once, then again. No answer. The third time, I tried the knob. It turned. He always said, locking the door was for people who had something to hide. I stepped in like I belonged. The office was to the right. Light on. Laptop open. There it was, a spreadsheet. I moved closer. It had names, numbers, dates. Right there on the desktop, a folder, Camellia Contracts. I didn't hesitate. I took the flash drive from my purse, slid it in, and dragged the folder over. My hand was steady, heart calm, like I was doing laundry, not exposing fraud. But inside, a storm was building. Click. The door behind me creaked. I turned slow. Howard stood there, tie loose, sleeves rolled. No surprise on his face. Just that smug little look he used when he thought he had the upper hand. I figured you'd come sniffing around, he said. I didn't answer. Just kept my hand near my phone. You asked for this, he added, stepping into the room. And you gave it, I said. Then raised the phone. Recording started the moment I walked in. He froze. I turned the laptop toward me. Camellia Whitford, consulting fees, unauthorized use of joint accounts. Do I need to keep reading? You don't understand what you're doing, he snapped. I understand enough. I scrolled further. Looks like you've been building a nice little empire on my back. You're being dramatic, and you're being documented, I said. His jaw clenched. You think this'll hold up? It's nothing. Nothing? I leaned forward. You turned my home into a ledger. I'm turning it into evidence. He moved toward me. I stepped back, finger on the side of my phone. You really think you can win this? He asked. Lower now, more like a warning than a question. I don't need to win, I replied. I just need the truth out loud. The silence between us could have broken glass. Then I stepped around him, calm, walked out with the flash drive in one hand and my dignity in the other. Back home. I went straight to the bedroom, tucked the drive deep inside my little safe, the one no one touched, not even the kids. I sat on the edge of the bed, let the air settle around me. No panic, no tears, just a steady breath. I picked up the phone, called Sterling, told him everything. I've got the files. I've got him cornered. We move tomorrow. He didn't say much, just listened. That's what I needed. After we hung up, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, I used to count on kindness. Now I count on truth. A ding! Text from Vanessa. Mom, you up? Folks are talking. I smiled to myself. Let them talk, I typed. I'm about to sing. Night came soft. I was in the living room, tea in hand, staring out the window when I noticed it. A black SUV parked across the street. Lights off, engine humming low. I leaned forward just enough. Camellia. She sat behind the wheel, phoning her hand, eyes pointed at my house, watching. She didn't blink. I didn't either. We stayed like that a while, two women, both stubborn, both watching. Then I reached for the curtain and closed it slow, deliberate. "So now it's a waiting game," I whispered. "Let's see who breaks first." I opened the envelope in my glove box. Inside was a new document, a summons. Howard had filed suit against me, defamation, breach of contract. He was trying to corner me in court now. My hands didn't shake. I stared at the paper, then at my reflection in the car mirror. I drove downtown with quiet determination. In the courthouse lobby, I saw faces. I recognized church members, neighbors, women who once nodded at me in Sunday service. Now they whispered, "She's going to get exposed." My heart jumped, but I held myself upright. Truth held straight posture. Sterling met me at the entrance. We slipped into a small conference room. Closed doors leaned in close. They came with a stack of paper. Howard's attorney dropped it in front of me, emails, photos, documents they claimed proved libel. Edited images, cropped screenshots, evidence of my fabrications. Sterling stood and spoke, quiet, firm. He showed backups, original timestamps, unedited emails I'd stored months before. A hush came when he asked, "You meant to copy this before the revisions?" Howard's team sputtered. I sat with my back straight. Shame would not be part of today's agenda. That afternoon, I walked into the charity gala. Howard hosted under the guise of goodwill. I came quietly, blending in. I watched the program slides, the applause, the photos of supposed founders and investors. The next slide rode Bogue and Marisol Initiative. There it was, my name missing, my work credited entirely to Marisol. Guests applauded. Marisol stood with dignity and a bow. My chest tightened. I stood, walked through guests to the microphone stand. The room hushed. I said, "Excuse me." Credits were owed, not given. Silence fell heavy. Eyes turned. I listed what I had done. The funds, the planning, the community outreach, dates, amounts, and called out the lies by name. Gasps. Some cried out, "You did all this?" Marisol tried to interrupt. I cut her off. "I'm not asking for your permission to exist." Confusion reigned. Some guests came to me afterward, offering awkward apologies. Others walked away. I returned home late, body tired, but spirit lit. I found my mother's old journal and read her words. When they rewrite your story, don't erase yourself, write it louder. I gathered every document, video, recording, and placed backups in compartments only I knew. My vow echoed, "They don't get to rewrite my worth." That night came a knock on my door. I opened it to find a plain envelope with public exposure 101 stamped in red. I stepped into the ballroom of Howard's restaurant, disguised in a deep blue dress and quiet confidence. The lights were low, jazz drifting from the speakers. Guests in elegant suits and gowns nodded to me as I passed. Marisol stood on stage, telling her origin story, how she built community programs, raised funds, donated to causes. People clapped politely. In that moment, I felt my pulse steady. Tonight they would hear the real story. One way or another, this silence ends. I moved closer to the stage, hands tucked, phone recording in my palm. As Marisol flipped to her slideshow, a new slide flickered in. Miss Rita, donor, planner, community builder. The audience murmurs roared. Marisol froze, tried to skip the slide, but it stayed. Phones raised, lights flashing. I stood, calm. Let's correct some credits, I said. I pulled out matching receipts, contracts, my collated evidence. The room grew quiet. I read names, dates, amounts, proof of what I had done, not what was stolen from me. Marisol's face went pale. The crowd shifted, gasps floated. Just then, on several phones, a live video began. Zora had posted the confession she recorded earlier. Howard and Marisol plotting to erase me. The screen lit up. Watch live. The truth unveiled. Guests gasped. Some covered mouths. Some pushed buttons frantically. Marisol reached to block the video feed. But it was too late. The truth was emotion. I stepped forward. I never wanted a spotlight, but I refused to sit in the dark. The applause cracked through the room. Tears formed in eyes. Some people stood. Some nodded. Faces changed. Behind me, chaos. Some rushed to me, apologizing. Some hissed at Marisol. Howard vanished from the stage. Marisol stood bewildered, unable to speak. I backed away to backstage, heart racing but head clear. I pulled my phone out and texted Sterling. Deploy the final move tonight. I glanced at Vanessa's message. You show them who you are. I smiled softly. Back at home, I held the folded swan napkin from wedding night an echo. I thought about how far I'd come. From humiliation to center stage of my own story. I whispered to myself, tonight I gave voice to every time they tried to erase me. And then headlights flashed through my window. Someone waited outside my door. I rose, evidence folder in hand, breathing slow and ready. The morning after the gala felt different. Not louder, not quieter, just clearer. I got dressed in something plain, pressed and proper, and made my way to the church hall for the elders' gathering. It wasn't some grand invitation, just a small community recognition event, but my name had been listed in the program. I walked in with my head held steady, not high. There were side glances, half smiles. Some folks barely looked at me. Others nodded, then looked away like they didn't want to get involved. I understood it. Seen it before. The moderator leaned in and whispered, "We like to honor you today, Elder Garnet." That name, Elder, not widow, not troublemaker, Elder. I stepped to the pulpit slow, took in the room. Let the silence settle. "Some of you saw me broken," I said, voice clear. "Today you'll hear me whole." And I told them, not everything, just enough. Enough to pull back the curtain. Enough to make it known that I wasn't some bitter woman chasing ghosts. I was the one they tried to erase. And I didn't disappear. When I finished, the claps weren't thunderous. They were human, honest. And for the first time in a long time, I felt seen again. Then Zora. She walked up, no warning, took the mic, looked out at folks like she'd been waiting her whole life. "I watched them erase Grandma for years," she said, voice trembling just enough. "Not today." The crowd rose, not all of them, but enough to shake the floorboards. We held each other there, in front of everybody. A bond no lie could crack. Healing, I realized, isn't pretending it didn't happen. It's standing in the middle of it and deciding you're still worthy of love. Later that afternoon, with my heels clicking firm down Howard's walkway, I carried a brown envelope in hand. He opened the door, looking like he already knew. I handed it to him. "You've got 72 hours to leave the property." He scoffed. "You're really doing this?" I didn't answer. The movers came the next hour. His furniture rolled down the driveway like memories being evicted one by one. I watched from across the street. No words, just breath. "You don't own the air I breathe anymore," I whispered to no one in particular. When I got home, I went to the back of my closet. Tucked behind old sweaters was a sealed envelope. My handwriting on the outside. "To read when it's over." I wrote it months ago, maybe longer. I opened it. The words said, "If you lose yourself in the eyes of others, you vanish." I folded it again, tucked it into the back of my Bible. No need to read it twice. By dawn, I was on the porch. The sky painted soft gold. The birds just starting their conversations. My hand held a cup of coffee, not shaking for once, not heavy, just still. Scars don't fade, but they stop bleeding eventually. I walked through fire. I whispered to the wind. I didn't just survive, I became light. And I stood up. They say a phoenix never sees the ashes that birthed her flame. And I don't need to.